looking for the domain of this. Okay, so what we're going to do is find out either where it can be or can't be. So for this, now when we had, in the other video, when we had a fraction or a rational, what we did was we put it equal to 0. Well, with this, we can't have a negative number underneath a radical. So what we'll do here is say 9 minus 6x has to be greater than, now in this case it could be equal to 0. It can be 0, but it just can't be less than 0. Okay, and so then we'll solve this. So we'd say minus 9 from both sides. So we get negative 6x is greater than or equal to negative 9. Divide both sides by negative 6. So x, now remember we have to reverse our inequality here. And so we end up with 1.5. So x is less than or equal to 1.5. Now, to use our notation for this, what we would say is, okay, so x is less than this. So from negative infinity to 1.5, okay, we're good. That's our domain. Now it includes this, so now we'll use a bracket and we'll use a parentheses for this. Now with this one, we're still looking at domain. Now let's talk through this one. Now before we had a square root. Now underneath a square root we can't have a negative, but underneath a cubed root we can. So for this one, this would be all real numbers. X is not limited by anything. So it'd be from negative infinity to positive infinity. Would be the domain of this one. Okay, let's look at this. Now here, okay, we have a fraction look to it, so we know we cannot have 0 in the denominator. So again, what we'll do is we'll put x squared minus 4 is equal to 0. And then we'd add 4 to both sides. And we end up with x squared is equal to 4. And then we take the square root of both sides, and so we know x is plus or minus 2. It would make this 0. Now, so the way we would write this out is from negative infinity to negative 2. Now remember, our domain does not include the negative 2, so we're going to use our parentheses. Then we do a union, and then go from negative 2 to 2, parentheses again because it does not include that. Okay, union, and then from 2 to infinity. Okay, so our domain for this particular function can be any number other than 2 or negative 2. And this tells everybody what's included in our domain. Alright, now here we're combining two different things. We have a fraction look to it, and we also have a square root. So that means it cannot be negative underneath here, and it can't be 0. So the way we would do this is we would just set it up as x squared minus 8 has to be greater than 0. Now we do not include the equal to since it's underneath the fraction. So it's in the denominator, so it doesn't include that. Now we just solve, we add 8 to both sides. So we end up with x squared is greater than 8. Now what we would do here is we take the square root of both sides. And so x, okay, has to be greater than x has to be greater than square root of 8, or x has to be less than negative square root of 8. Okay, so the way so again, and you could test numbers. So if I put 0 in here, which would be between square root of 8 and the square root of negative 8, I would end up with negative 8 underneath, which we cannot have underneath a square root. Alright, so to write the set, so x has to be from, it can be anything from negative infinity to negative square root of 8. Now remember, it doesn't include square root of 8 because that would make it negative square root of 8 because that would make this 0. Alright, so we have the parentheses. Then we do union. Okay. Now, where you have to be careful with this is between the square root of 8 and positive square root of 8 does not exist. Okay, and so we would pick up again at the square root of 8 to infinity, and again it doesn't include that. So from basically it doesn't exist from the negative square root of 8 to the square root of 8. So hopefully that helps with the domain. Domain is usually we figure out where it can't be, and then we include everything else. Alright, now this one is more involved because we've got quite a few things going on. So first of all, we can't have a negative in the numerator because of the square root. So let's go ahead and do 9 minus 4x. Okay, and so it's got to be greater than 0. So let's subtract 9, and so we get negative 4x is greater than negative 9 divided by negative 4. Now when we divide by that negative, remember we have to reverse the inequality. So we get x is less than positive. Let's go ahead and make that a fraction. Alright, so I meant make it a decimal. So we made that a decimal. X has to be less than 2.25. And that would be the domain restriction for the top part. Now let's see about the bottom. Now with this one, oh I'm sorry, it could be equal to that. Left out the equal because up top can be 0. It just cannot be negative. Now at the bottom, that's where we would not have the equals to because it can't equal 0. Alright, so let's solve this. So add 1. So we get 2x is greater than 1 divided by 2. So x has to be greater than 1/2, or let's do 0.5. Alright, so now this is where we're going to have to be careful with our domain. Now with this one, because it has to be less than 2.25. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put it over here, 2.25. Okay, and it has to be less than that, so it goes down to 0.5 based off of this, but it can include 0.5. So I'm going to put a parentheses there. So our domain here would be between 0.5 and 2.25.